Welcome back. You're watching Showdown. Parliament is sitting, as I mentioned, off the top of the program, and we've got three parliamentary representatives, clearly with nothing better to do than to be here on Showdown. We've got Green Senator Scott Ludlam. Thanks for your company.
Good evening.
And from the Labor Party, we've got Nick Champion, and from the Liberal Party, we've got Stephen Chobo. Gentlemen, thanks for your company as well.
Good to be here.
Can I just start by asking, we've got the three of you, I mean, have you heard the one about the Green, the Liberal and the Labor all wedged into a tiny Sky News studio in Parliament House? My first question is there anything that you three can agree on?
We've been getting on very well here.
Oh, yeah, but not at a social level, I mean on a policy level. Is there anything that you three can strongly agree on? Because it strikes me as an outsider watching politics that you're all into each other all the time. There must be some policies that there's consensus on that we just don't hear about in the media?
I think there is, Peter. I'm sure that we could all agree that Labor's border protection policies aren't working. Yeah. Can we all agree on that?
I think that's...
Come on, even you want to change your own policies.
You've just had a demonstration about why we can't actually nominate a policy, but there is much of the work of the Parliament is agreed, and we go through it in a gentlemanly fashion.
Well, Peter, but I mean, I'm not being mischievous. The reality is that
yes,
Labor... Labor has conceded that they want to change their policies.
Well, Stephen Chobo, let me jump in and ask you a question then. Can you all agree on that Malcolm Turnbull would be a better leader of the Liberal Party?
Yeah, I think I could sign up.
That's an excellent comment.
Well, but the reality is that the reality is
we're on a unity ticket.
The reality is that Tony is doing an amazing job as leader. We're 6 points in front of the Labor Party, and I think that it's quite clear that he'll be leading us to the next election.
All right, I'm going to just turn over to Scott.
I'd be interested in Nick's answer about Kevin Rudd, Peter, because I mean we know that Nick resigned as caucus secretary because he supported Kevin Rudd over the top of Julia Gillard. So I'm sure that he and I could agree that Julia Gillard's not a very good Prime Minister.
Well, no. Look, at the time, I backed Kevin Rudd, but I accept the decision of caucus, and in all my public commentary, which you would have no doubt read, in the run-up to the ballot, I said Julia Gillard was a very fine Prime Minister and an admirable person. I think she does a great job.
All right, we'll let you two eviscerate your parliamentary careers in a moment. But let me just bring Scott Ludlam in. On a slightly more serious note, Senator Ludlam, let me ask you about the Greens' amendments that have been pressed in relation to the mining tax. What's that all about, and how likely is the Labor Party, do you think, to agree with it?
Well, in a general sense, we're trying to move the model back to something closer to what Treasury first proposed in 2008. As for what the government will agree to, they've given up potentially as much as $75 billion over a period of 10 years or so, and they've done that in a deal with the three big mining companies to the detriment, in my view, of some of the juniors in the mid-tier part of the industry, and certainly to the detriment of the public. So we'll propose a series of amendments to try and move the model back to where we started, because we think that these resources actually belong to the taxpayer.
But what do you think the likely response is going to be from the government? We'll ask for Nick Champion's view in a moment, but what have you heard in relation to what senior government ministers are saying?
I think the government's probably going to take a line that's pretty inflexible, and I think that's to our great cost. We haven't even seen the Senate inquiry report yet. We haven't seen the debate start in the Senate. I'm an optimist. Who knows? Maybe they'll see sense and start returning some of these resources to the taxpayer.
All right, Nick Champion and Steve Chobo. That's how you have a serious answer, by the way, guys. But let me ask. I mean, do you think that this is just gamesmanship by the Greens on this? Do you think that there's any chance that the government will buy into it? It strikes me that there's an opportunity here, perhaps a political one, for the Labor Party to agree with this, get the tax cut through for small businesses, but then be able to make the point that it's been blocked in relation to big businesses by Tony Abbott and the Greens.
Well, I don't know. Steve, do you want to go first?
Well, I mean, look, Peter, the reality is that as far as the coalition's concerned, the real issue here is really built around two things. The first is that you've got today the Finance Minister, Penny Wong, refused on 5 separate occasions to commit the Labor Party to a tax cut for small business. They're trying to create wriggle room around this. They said that they were going to reduce company tax for small business. Now they're walking away from that commitment. The second point too, and this has been a position the coalition's had for some time, is that if the Labor Party's serious about getting this through, why won't they release the modelling? Why is it that, as a matter of course, at a state government level, the state governments will release information about assumptions on quantity and on cost? But at a federal level, Wayne Swan won't do it. So, I mean, I think if Labor's going to be serious with the Australian people, they need to commit to keeping this promise, otherwise it'll be yet another broken promise, and they need to release all the information.
Nick, your response?
Well, look, I think basically the mining tax has been contested, for a year now. There's been plenty of debate about it, plenty of contested public debate about it. I think what it boils down to at the end is that the Greens want to kill the golden goose, the Liberals want to just let it run around the yard and do its own thing, and we want to have a sensible regime that extracts the profits of these mineral resources which the Australian people own at the end of the day.
Are you confident, though, that the Treasury figures are going to add up, Nick Champion? Because at the end of the day, from Twiggy Forrest to many others, they don't seem to think that they're going to pay that much tax.
Well, look, I, unlike others, trust Treasury because Treasury gave us the advice that's got us through the global financial crisis in fine form. Unlike other countries, we don't have the problems of Europe or the problems of North America.
I thought that was Wayne Swan's to crow about.
Well, look.
Yeah, let's get back to the original Treasury model.
Of course, the Treasurer, played a leading role in doing all that because he's a political figure. But the advice from Treasury was critical. I think you'd all agree.
So have you seen the Treasury advice?
I'll let you have a go. I'll let you have a go. The point about it is, we've got a plan to basically have a sensible profits-based regime to fund cuts to small business, to fund infrastructure and to fund superannuation. And that is in marked difference to our opponents, both the Greens, who want to, basically tax gold and other metals so that they can shut down the uranium industry, and of course the Liberal Party, who just want to let the mining industry off the hook for paying any sensible company profit tax or profit-based tax at all. So, we're the sensible middle of this, and we've got the two extremes here at the table.
Well, how do you respond to that, Scott Ludlam? I mean, the Greens have basically backed this government as an alliance partner for a large chunk of its time in government. Do you accept that you're an extreme out on the left?
No. I wonder why I wouldn't accept that caricature. We're not here to kill the golden goose at all. Look, you were just seeing as how Nick was just praising Treasury. It's the Treasury model that we're proposing to roll back to. For political reasons, Prime Minister Gillard has caved in to the demands of the big mining companies, and of course they don't want to pay more tax. And look, on uranium, I don't want to close it down on tax grounds. I want to close it down on public health and environmental grounds. And the fact that 3% of the Japanese landmass is now uninhabitable because of uranium that we sold to the Japanese government for its nuclear power plants, that's why I want to shut the uranium industry down. I don't want to tax it, I want to close it down.
Stephen Chobot, what's your reaction to that?
Well, what we're seeing evidence of isn't that there's a sensible middle ground by the Labor Party at all, Peter. What you've got is a Labor Party that's finding itself friendless. I noticed that Nick said that he'd seen the Treasury modelling. So what we know is that the Labor Party is willing to share Treasury modelling with the backbench of the Labor Party, but they're not willing to share it with the alternative government, and they're not willing to share it with the Greens in the Senate. You said that you support the Treasury modelling.
There's been a year's worth of debate.
One at a time, guys. It's starting to sound like question time.
Well, my question is, Peter, Nick just turned around and said that he supports the Treasury modelling, the Treasury modelling was correct. And is he doing that? Have you not even seen it?
Well, no.
You're just talking through
what I said was, I support the Treasury's advice, and I support the Treasury's assertions. And you guys are the ones who always, same as you did during the GFC, second-guessing Treasury. You spent a fair bit of time verballing Treasury during the GFC, and now you're doing the same thing again. And it's basically the same approach. Anytime there's a sensible proposition, you attack the experts, you create division and dissension in the community, and you try and say no as much as possible to derail the plans. And this is all part of the sort of Tea Party, American-style partisan tactics that are used.
All right, let's move on, gentlemen. Gentlemen, let's move on. Let's move to the issue of, just quickly, Gina Reinhardt, this family dispute. Can somebody please explain to me why Albie Schultz and Barnaby Joyce were weighing in?
I'm going to leave that one to Steve. That's one of his party room colleagues. What on earth is going on there?
I'm interested as well.
What is going on there?
I'm not going to explain. I've not discussed it with either Albie or Barnaby, and I noticed today, Peter, that they didn't want to make comments, so I'm not going to attempt to shed any light on it.
Free kick, Nick?
Oh, look, I won't take a free kick. It's just all very strange, isn't it? It's all very strange behaviour for public officials to be involved in civil litigation that's essentially a private matter and should be left to the parties, I think.
All right, we'll move on. With the time we've got then, I just want to talk about Commandant Kafer. Now, Tony Abbott came out before he'd had a chance to see the report. It wasn't, in fairness, being released by the government, and he said that the QC's report fundamentally cleared this commandant. Now, that's not quite right. Now, I think there's a fair bit of grey between the idea that the report has completely cleared him versus the idea that there was still a suggestion that it was unfortunate that the disciplinary hearing for the young lady still went ahead the day after the story broke on Channel 10 News. Can I get a response on that, maybe starting with you, Stephen Chobo?
Well, look, I haven't had the chance to look at the report, Peter.
Didn't stop your leader commentating, though. Come on, in fairness.
No, but I guess the point that I was trying to make, though, is that, I mean, you make the assertion that there's a fair bit of grey there. That may or may not be correct. But what I do know is this, is that the Defence Association, Neil James, the head of the Defence Force Association, has a real problem with the current Minister for Defence, Stephen Smith. What I also know is that there are major generals...
Chobo, what he said as well is he said that he hasn't seen a Defence Minister that's got the Defence Force this offside since Peter Reith in the Children Overboard affair.
Yeah, but the point is that you've also got... And look, and that was an issue that the government of the day dealt with. But you see, the difference here is that we've got a government that has a Defence Minister that isn't supported by the Defence Force. We've got a government that has a Defence Minister that doesn't even want the job. And we think that it's time that the government dealt with that.
What do you think about that, Scott Ludlam? Let me go to you. I mean, at the end of the day, the Greens are sort of sitting to the side of this debate. How do you see what's happened with Commandant Kafer? And equally, how do you see Stephen Smith's response in light of the fact that it does seem that he doesn't really want to be in the job, he'd rather be in Foreign Affairs?
No, Peter, I caught a little bit of your interview with the Minister before we came in here. I think he's doing a very good job under very, very difficult circumstances. As you know, the reports that have been released on sexual abuse and hazing and bastardisation inside the ADF go back decades. Here at last we've got a Minister who's prepared to take it on. If we're going to put these people in uniform into harm's way in theatres of war, the very least we can guarantee them is that they're not going to be abused by people on their own side. And good on the Minister for standing up to some of this behaviour. We're in an awful mess in Afghanistan, and the people that we've sent into harm's way there have an unbelievable task in front of them. I would say probably an unwinnable task. The very least we can make sure of is that the home front is looked after. So I think it's totally inappropriate that the opposition are gunning for Minister Smith's job at the moment. I think he should be left alone to do that very difficult job.
And what's your view on that, Nick Champion? I mean, do you take the view that the Minister is equipped to stay in the position after some of the stories that came to light that he was after Kevin Rudd's old job?
Well, look, let's first deal with my attitude to the Defence Forces. I've always found the Defence Forces in my electorate to be amongst the most professional and well-regarded people that I've ever met and ever had dealings with. I've got to say I've never seen any signs of the sorts of culture of bastardisation that others have referred to or reported. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and when it does happen it needs to be dealt with very firmly indeed, and I think that's what Stephen Smith has done, and I think that's what ministers should do. If there's a bit of blowback from some in the broader defence community because of doing that, well, that's just one of the prices I guess you pay for public office. But I think Stephen Smith's a very good minister. In all my dealings with him over my time in Parliament, I've always found him to be a good judge of character, a very earnest and thoughtful administrator, public administrator, and I think as we have this debate, I think that his virtues will shine through against some of the criticism that he's been getting.
All right, Stephen Chobo, final view on this?
Well, so in essence, the Greens and Labor think that the Labor Minister's doing a good job. The Defence Force, the Defence Force Association, and various others involved in defence don't think that he's doing a good job, including the fact that the Minister himself doesn't want the job.
Nick Champion, your response?
Well, of course the Minister wants a job, and this sort of speculation...
Does he really? I mean, this is a fair question. Does he really want the job?
Of course he wants a job. Of course he wants a job.
Of course you're going to say that.
Of course he wants a job. It is serving the country in one of the most important roles that you can get. Of course he wants a job.
All right, Scott,
that simple.
Scott Ludlam, let me...
And he was very clear in his press conferences to say that, you know, his attitude when the ministry was decided was very, very clear and again, sober, thoughtful, earnest.
I'm sorry, Peter, but this is ridiculous. I mean, the Australian ran on their front page that Bob Carr was going to be... Hang on. That Bob Carr...
must be true.
Oh, that's right. It's the hate media.
No, that changes everything.
What we know, Peter, was that the Australian ran on the front page that Bob Carr was going to be... No, this is a statement of fact. They ran on their front page that Bob Carr was going to be appointed Foreign Affairs Minister. The Prime Minister said, no, that's completely untrue. And then, lo and behold, 4 days later, Bob Carr does become Foreign Affairs Minister. And part of that story was the fact that Stephen Smith lobbied against Bob Carr being the appointment, worked to try to become Foreign Affairs Minister himself. Now, you can't dispute that. That's fact.
No, well, you've got the final word, because I have a 5-second countdown. I'm definitely going to exceed it. So, Stephen Chobo, Nick Champion, and sitting a little bit more quietly, Senator Scott Ludlam. We appreciate all three of you joining us on this episode of Showdown. Thanks for your company.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Cheers.
And thank you for your company as well. We will be back at the same time next Tuesday. See you then.